Yeah, it started. Yeah, so we were talking about planar surfaces yesterday. Now we will talk about other orientable surfaces. For example, this surface we have seen many a times in the talk itself. So what is so you take this. Now what you do is imagine this like now. Now yeah. So I can't draw properly, but you can just basically lift the upper circle, the upper annulus above the plane, and then extend it outwards. Extend the boundary of it outwards, and you'll reach a point of this, like the puncture torus. Can you see how? Uh, by the way, there is a homeomorphism properly given here, but still, if you have a doubt, let me. I will explain more. Can you see how this is equal to a punctured torus? I'll give 1 or 2 minutes to just take this in the homeomorphism. Uh, if it is clear to you, just type yes in the chat. If you need more time, just type you need more time. Basically, just lift this upper annulus up the plane and then extend it. Yeah, sure. So you can see how this is same as these two are same. You can see how basically just remove this part, just smoothly reduce this part, and you'll get this the upper, and then from there this homeomorphism should be clear. Once it's clear to you, just type yes. If I see 2 or 3 yeses, I'll move on. Yes, okay. uh, 1 or 2 more yeses. The below diagram is clear. Yeah, so basically this basket type thing is similar to this the upper diagram. Just basically remove this. Wait, let me mark with a different color. Remove this part. Just bring down the surroundings of the neighborhood of this and reduce to this. How those two are same. Okay, so let me explain. My diagram is not really clear, but basically what you do is this part you start bringing down smoothly and you reduce it. This part. Similarly for this part. Let me. Yeah, I'll share the content back again. Okay, so we see that rank is 2k, right? So we have essentially observed two types of surfaces, two families of surfaces. First is the planar surfaces, which are classified by the rank, and second are these puncture toruses, which are classified, which we will classify later on. We can combine the surfaces in two families as follows. So suppose you have, let's say, yeah. So suppose you have this type of wait, let me show with this. Yeah, so suppose you have this first surface. What you can do is attach a disk to it, or attach a annulus to it along this boundary. So uh, we can combine these two surfaces by just joining them along the segments of the boundary. We will later on prove that these are the only types of orientable surfaces possible, which has boundary. Orientable surfaces with boundary. Yeah. So on the other hand, we can glue together a planar surface and a punctured torus along a segment of the boundary circles. Yeah. So now we start the classification of orientable surfaces with boundary. So the classification of orientable surfaces with boundary is basically dependent on two things: the rank and the number of boundary circles. That is, if you are given the rank and you are given the number of boundary circles, you can uniquely determine that orientable surface with boundary. So before proving the above result, we have to look at minute details. So in the case of planar, do you all remember we did that a substantial arc has to connect different boundary circles? Does everyone remember this? In case of planar, yes, yes. But in the case of other surfaces, for example, if you observe, wait a second, if you observe this this surface has only one boundary circle. Let's start from, suppose, say this. I'll start following the boundary. This has only one boundary component. Does everyone see why?
Yes.
Yes, good. So now what we basically do is, so essentially whenever you cut a substantial arc from that surface, the puncture torus, you are connecting points of the same boundary circle. Why does that not separate the separate that whole surface? Is because the Jordan curve theorem we applied by during saying that while saying that, suppose that we have a planar surface, we can't connect a substantial arc to the same boundary component. We applied Jordan curve theorem to say that. But here Jordan curve theorem is not valid because we are not. This is not a planar surface. Jordan curve theorem is not valid, not on non-planar surfaces, right? Just a second. Yeah. Uh, Anish, can you mute yourself?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Good. So now what we say is, given these surface, suppose we are given a surface which has two boundary circles. Then we've proved that there is a substantial arc that has its end on different boundary circles. This is different from what we were saying earlier. We proved earlier that a substantial arc has to connect different boundary circles in a planar surface. Now we are saying, given any surface with given any orientable surface with two boundary circles, there is a substantial arc that has its ends on different boundary circles. So how do we prove it? Okay, so let's suppose we have these two boundary circles. You can see this figure below, and we connect using this cut line. What a cut line does is immediately it separates two points to its left and right. For example, say this and this. Now what we'll show is that these both are connected, if this is the only cut line. So we will start by, let's say, the left point. So suppose I say this is the foot of the cut line, substantial arc, and this is the head of the substantial arc. So we will start with the left point, move along the cut line towards the head, and then follow the boundary circle and come on the other side. We will arrive on the right side of the cut line and then follow along the cut line to get towards this right point. So we see that these two points are connected. So this is a substantial arc. So does everyone see why there has to be a substantial arc that has its ends on different boundary circles? We just saw this cut line and we saw that this does not separate, so this is a substantial arc. Yes, cool. So now yeah. So this is just a proof written properly. You can read it when I post the slide. This essentially says the same thing that I just said. Yeah. So what we do is cut the surface along a collection of substantial arcs until you get a disk. Uh, so whenever you have, suppose you have a surface which has different number of boundary components, it has a k rank. Then you cut along the all the substantial arcs and you get a disk. Now suppose, let me give an example. Let's start with let's say this annulus. So suppose I separate it along this. This is a substantial arc, Now what we will do is glue it later on. So we will right now give it a orientation. So suppose I give it this orientation. So my surface now becomes, so this is my new surface. This is essentially the same surface as before. Now what we do is make it into a disk. So this is a disk. So we just reshape it, and these arrows are now on the segment of the disk. Suppose this and suppose this. Now the unique thing about this is the arrows have to point opposite of each other. Do you see why? If anyone sees why the arrows have to point opposite to of each other, that is, if one is clockwise, the other has to be anti-clockwise. Just unmute yourself and speak. Otherwise, I will tell the answer in 1 minute. So I guess I will tell the answer now. So suppose this surface has ends on the same of the same orientation. Suppose this is a disk, and you have this segment and this segment, which points in the same direction. Now we essentially disconnected the surface along that portion. So now we have to glue it back, right? So when I glue it back, can you observe if I glue it back in this orientation, so suppose I glue it back in, we have to uh, we have to paste along this side. So when I just make it sorry. So just reconstructing this olive uh, colored strip, we see that this Mobius. So this, when we rearrange the arrows, here it becomes like this. If they were both in clockwise direction or they were in both anti-clockwise direction, and this surface we get new, we have to paste this strip. This is a Mobius strip, but we were always considering orientable surface, so it can't have a Mobius strip as a component of itself as a subsurface. So these both arrows have to point in opposite directions. Is this clear with everyone? If not, just say no. If yes, say yes. Or if you need time, just say I need time. No. Okay. So let me explain once more. Let me draw a new diagram. Okay. So suppose, uh, is the process clear with you that what I am doing basically is disconnecting the surface along a substantial arc to get a disk, and we had to give it an orientation to paste it back, right? So suppose I took this annulus, or suppose the surface, the disk I get after disconnecting the substantial arcs, we will have its substantial arcs. We will have the segments of this surface having arrows on it, right? Basically corresponding to the substantial arc we disconnected. So suppose they both are in clockwise direction. Now, since we essentially disconnected the substantial arc to paste it back, we have to paste it back, right? A natural way to paste it back is by a strip of paper or anything you like. So I have to attach these both arcs, right? I have to attach these both arcs in this particular orientation. Suppose I attach this strip of paper and I will rotate it or fold it, give it a twist, however the surface demands. So I'll just this same olive, let's say, strip, I draw it here and see the orientation if both the arrows are in clockwise direction. So if the both arrows are in clockwise direction, so suppose this, then the other will be downwards if the both are in clockwise direction. And if you I have to paste this strip back, and if you observe, this is a Mobius strip. You remember gluing the opposite sides of surface, we discussed that this becomes a Mobius strip. But since we were considering orientable surfaces from the start, we can't paste a Mobius strip back, right? A Mobius strip can't be a subsurface of an orientable surface. So these both have to point in opposite directions. if these both arrows are in opposite direction, opposite orientation, that is clockwise and anti-clockwise, then these both will point in same direction, and then there is no problem in pasting them back. Now do you understand? Okay, so yes, so it is clear with everyone. So cool. I'll move on. Okay, so we observed that each cut line, when you orient it and arrange it into a disc, these both discs, so these both arrows have to point in opposite orientation. That is, if one is clockwise, other has to be anti-clockwise, right? So when the reshaping has taken place, the arrow of the mates. So what I call this, so basically the arcs, when I disconnected it. So these two portions of boundary, this and this, I'll call mates. So I have to fuse the mates later on. I'll now cut it, but I'll have to fuse the mates later on. Is the definition of mates clear? It's essentially the separation, the substantial arc which separates the both the surfaces, both the to both. Let's say these both are handles, kind of. Both are mates. So we disconnect along a substantial arc, and we get two separate a separation of the surface. The left and right side, I'll call them mates. So this is my definition of mates. So when the reshaping takes place, the arrow of the mates have a peculiar property. If one points in clockwise, the other points in and counterclockwise. So we see this. This is a result of orientability of the surface. So now the what I do is, basically, if I have multiple mates, I'll label them with letters. So as you can see in this surface, I have three. Let's say I have three kind of three holes in it. So I have three holes and basically four boundary components. I find a system of substantial arcs and disconnect it, and I get. You can see label them with letters. A minus sign means we are just moving towards the clockwise direction. So I give them the direction and separate them. And when it becomes into a disk, so suppose we have, I'll talk about this. So if this becomes into a disk, let's say I start from this point and move towards here. So first comes minus C from here. Then comes then comes minus B, then comes minus A, then comes B, then comes C. Can you see why? So I'll label them, and we can write it in this form. Do you see why the lettering is C, minus B, minus A, B, C? Just say yes or no in the chat. Okay. So so now, to describe so the mates can be labeled with arcs, with letters, so that those with the same letter come from the same substantial arc. We will recognize the surface by looking at the sequence of letters along the boundary of the disk, and by finding ways to rearrange them into some certain order, some standard order. So to describe the standard order, we considered these both, and I found, so here is the below diagram is another realization of another system of substantial arcs. Now, when I cut along this system, I get essentially minus z, z, minus x, x, minus y, y, right? So I'll try to rearrange them and bring into a certain standard order. So what is that certain order? First, let's talk about the double torus, puncture double torus. This is a puncture double torus, and we cut it along the substantial arcs. So suppose we say this was A, this was B, this was C, this was D. Or let's talk about first just a torus. Just that wait. This one. So suppose I cut along this and name it A. I cut along this and name it B and minus B. So let's start from here. What you get is A, B, minus A, minus B, right? Everyone can see why, right? So if you get a sequence of letter which corresponds to this sequence, then you know that your surface had a toroidal hole. I'll call this the toroidal hole. And if it has like something like A B B, sorry, A minus A, B minus B, then you know it corresponded to an annulus hole. Because when you reconstruct it into the surface, you will you have to paste it back, and you'll just get back the annulus hole. Okay, so the standard double torus is cut along its substantial arc, and in this case, the mate on the disk have a property that a pair of mates are separated by another pair of mates. For example, we saw in that toroidal hole, the single toroidal hole, AB minus A minus B. A minus A are separated by B, B minus B are separated by 1 minus A. One second. Yeah, so again, the minus sign just indicates that arrow is pointing clockwise. That's the convention. By the way, why do we take this convention of minus sign to be clockwise? Is because of the right hand rule. Suppose you stick up your thumb up, the natural direction your fingers will curl in is anti-clockwise direction. So that's why we take it normally to be positive. Okay, so yeah, if upon cutting along the substantial arcs, the two members of each pair of mates are either adjacent or are separated by at most one segment, then we will recognize the surface. Suppose they are adjacent, then we know that adjacent would mean that it has an annulus hole, and separated by at most one segment, then we will know it has a toroidal hole. We can even recognize a few more cases because okay, no, got it. Okay. So we can even recognize a few more cases because if there are arcs in the order AB minus BA, then these would correspond to two planar holes because that would be A. So you can just rearrange them in clock. So suppose AB minus B minus A would be equal to B minus B minus A. So you would have B minus B and A minus A. That's two planar holes. That is two annulus holes. So what should we do when between any two mates there is a large collection of other arcs? We should find a way to rearrange those arcs and reduce the number of collection of these arcs in between them, right? So we will find a means of sliding these arcs over each other so that the topology of the surface doesn't change. So to deform the surface in this way, we need to look at a different perspective. So suppose the mates with the same label fuse to form a substantial arc. So I'll again what we I discussed this just earlier. So suppose you have this. Let's say just a second. Yeah. So suppose you have this annulus hole and you cut it along this mark. So and this maps to a surface to a disk. What you can do is just attach a handle to it. We call this a handle. Okay, so at handle is very is a mathematical object. We can't define it right now, but it has very nice properties. So you can separate along the substantial arcs, and you can just paste back using handles. So suppose you have two planar holes. Let me show. Clear my annotations. Suppose you had let's say two holes. I cut along this, cut along this. So what I get is A minus A, B minus B, A minus A, similarly B minus B, that's a B. Now, when we paste it back, we just have to paste handles back, right? So this we will get again the same surface as before. So we get this surface, which is again the same surface we started with, right? So everyone sees why attaching the handle will give us the same surface as before, because we just separated along a substantial arc and we will just paste back those arcs in the same orientation. and because it is orientable, we will have, yeah. Anyone has any doubt? No? Okay, I'll continue. So if two handles are attached to a disc or another, then they can be slid over one another. How? So let's say you have this type of, so suppose this is a so essentially there are three types of handle slides. Suppose you have these two handles. Now what you do is, as the arrows show, you slide A over B and you get this surface. So you essentially, what you do is basically come here and slide it over here like this, and you get this. Everyone sees how this is possible. Just say yes or no in the chat. Everyone, yes? Okay, cool. So the second type is essentially the one related to the toroidal hole. So a toroidal hole, when you paste back, let's see what happens when you paste back a toroidal hole. Remember, you have A, you have B, then you have minus A, then you have minus B, or any permutation of this, because it is a disk. So now when I paste, let's say I, so it cannot be planar in this sense also. Like you can see why this cannot be a planar surface via toroidal hole. So essentially you get this uh, B minus A B A. So you get this as a toroidal hole. So what you do is basically slide A over B and bring it to the other side. That gives it a twist. Now cut. So let me show first. Okay, so you slide A over B here, and when you reach from here to here, you'll essentially see you get a twist. You can imagine that. Now, what you do is essentially cut along this arc, give it so cut, untwist, and reglue along the same orientation, and you'll get this. Uh, okay, so you translated B minus A B A to A minus B minus AB. No, can you explain once more? Which part? I actually didn't see the chart. Sorry. The last part, the which, like, attaching the handle point or this particular transformation. Okay. Okay. So basically, this particular transformation, what you do is, you have this of a planar hole. So you have this two planar holes. So what you do is start with this end and you slide it along here. As my mouse is, just follow my mouse and you reach here. So just think about continuously deforming the that A part over the loop of B. So you'll this is your intermediate stage, and then you'll separate A and B. Do you see why now? Uh, yeah, okay. Now, similarly, along the second type, this corresponds to one toroidal hole. So slide A over B, you get it when you complete sliding, then you get a twist, uncut. Sorry, you cut it, untwist it, and reglue, and you get the surface. Now the third type is a little tricky. It helps in basically you can observe it. So basically it corresponds to three of these uh, basically it corresponds to three, let's say minus C minus B minus A CBA, and it is a little tricky in the sense you just need to observe carefully. So what you do is essentially first slide minus C over B, and you reach the other side of, let's say, or what you do is basically you slide minus B inside of C. So you slide, instead of cutting and then it's can't we just untwist? No, we can't just untwist, right? How can we untwist without cutting and rejoining? You have to cut and untwist and then rejoin. So now the second part, you what you do is take this B, and then what you do is basically slide it inside of C, and you get okay, yeah, okay. So basically you end up on this side, on between minus a and c, this minus b part, and then you have this twist, cut, untwist, and reglue. You get this. Now what you do is basically deform this. It is shown here, like pull a essentially, like it is shown here only. You get on the other side of c. If this is not clear, you will just have to spend more time observing it, which unfortunately we don't have right now. So I'll just leave it at that right now. And if it is clear to you, very well, nice. If it is not, just revisit the slides after the talk and reobserve. This part is not an essential part of the content that is to follow. So I'll just move on right now. Okay, so recall if each pair of mates were adjacent on the boundary of the disk or were separated by only one other arc to be fused, then we can recognize the surface. Now what we do is basically we count the adjacent pairs. The number of these is the number of annulus holes, and you count the number of quadruples of the form A minus B up to permutations. The number of these will be the number of toroidal pieces. So next we assume that there are no adjacent pairs. Nor are there any alternating quadruples of the form A minus B. Now, what we will do is basically when you have suppose you have this sequence of letters. So basically, just a second. Yeah, sure. Previous slide. Yeah. I'll move on now. I hope you have taken SS. So what we will show, if we are given, so essentially this is a combinatorics problem now. You're given a word of two H letters, that corresponds to each letter and minus or dot letter. You have to show by performing these. You have these equivalence classes that that is performed by attaching handle and sliding them over each other. We will show that we can convert any such word uh, into into a word that has both of these, only both of these. That is, it has only adjacent pairs, and it has alternating pairs. Okay, so let me. So this is essentially the problem now. So in the surface we will essentially have either the toroidal holes and or the adjacent, that is the planar holes, or both, any number of them. Okay, so let me. We will show this by induction. So as you can see, take any a and minus a. It has various arcs within it, various number of letters within it. Suppose we consider the mates a and minus a that have so what we call complexity is number of arcs between these two mates. Suppose we have a b minus a minus b. So the complexity of A is essentially 1, and same as the complexity of B, which is 1. So we want to show that we can always reduce the complexity to 1 or 0, right? Uh, all previous sli- uh, all previous slides, that will take some time, I guess. We will do that after the talk. Okay, I'll send the slides after the talk. It will take a lot of time if I just start showing all previous slides. Okay, so we see that we have to reduce the complexity to either 0 or to 1, right? That's our end goal. Now we induct on the complexity. Suppose we consider the mates which have the largest complexity, which have the smallest complexity bigger than 1. So we consider the pair of mates with the smallest complexity bigger than 1, and we will show we can reduce it. Then since the complexity is a natural number, we will essentially reach 1 or 0 at some point of time, right? This is clear to everyone. How what is the setup right now? Just say yes or no in the chat. uh, okay then, yeah. So the complexity of two different pairs of mates may be the same. Let's say the ones corresponding to the smallest complexity bigger than one are same. Then consider any one such pair. Yeah. So we would like to show that either the complexity is one or the complexity can be made smaller by handle slides. If we can show that, we would be finished. We would be finished. I mean, with the problem. Just to clarify, if we can make the small complexity of given pair of mates smaller, then we can eventually reduce it to 0 or 1. So, and we will know that these mates correspond to one of the two handles in the puncture torus or in a annulus hole. To see, we can always perform handle slides. We will consider three cases which are exhaustive. So the first case is essentially what you have is basically, suppose you have this, have some, let's say we consider this A, which is the mate with smallest complexity bigger than one. Suppose that the next immediate mate, which is B, has its mate inside of A, and you have other stuff here, other stuff here. But the next immediate pair, the next immediate mate B, suppose it's the other handle of it, the other side of handles occurs within A, then we can just slide A over B like this, and we will reduce its complexity, right? That's one case. Now the next case is when the pair of mates B does not exactly occur within that. So the next case we can essentially see. Suppose you have. I'll not make the handles right now. Suppose you have A. The next immediate is B. After some stuff, you get minus A, and some after some stuff you get minus B. I'll consider this setup right now. The first case I already discussed before. Now this is the next case. In this case, say, just see the next type of the next mate to B. It can't be A again. So wait, let me annotate again. Yeah. So just see this case. Uh, we have A, then you have B. We consider the next mate C. No, note there has to exist a C, because otherwise, if there does not exist a C, that is the sequence is A, B minus A, then we essentially have that complexity is 1, which is not according to our assumption. So now we suppose that the complexity we have that because of the complexity, we have another point C. Now, suppose that C again occurs within the second, let's say minus C occurs before minus A, right? So suppose this had like this here. Then we can slide both A and B over it and we will reduce the complexity. Otherwise, suppose C has, now let me clear my screen. Now, suppose in this case, C occurs after minus C occurs after minus A. Then we can just slide B over over minus C over C loop, and when like you take this B, slide it over here, and you'll bring it the B here. So essentially, if you reduce the B loop from like from in between the A and minus A. So again, you have reduced the complexity. So all these cases are exhaustive, and we can always reduce the complexity, and so we can always achieve complexity either 0 or 1. So that is clear to everyone, how we can reduce the complexity. Just say yes or no. Okay. Yes, yes. Okay. So next, so we have completed the classification of planar surfaces. So essentially, given an orientable surface with boundary, let's compute. We will compute its rank and the number of boundary components. Then we will find a system of substantial arcs. Then cut along those substantial arcs, reshape the surface along, like rebuild the surface by attaching handles. Uh, Again, then slide the handles and get a system which has a complexity a mix of 0 and 1. And then so this will be a standard uh, this will be a standard like a standard surface, right? So now since so suppose you have k boundary circles and n rank, you can bring it into this particular setup that has complexity 0 and 1 and 0, and so essentially each such each such surface will be equal to this standard surface that you can build. So we have completed the classification of orientable surfaces with boundary. Uh, so basically, you can identify the surface as being a standard surface with these invariants, that is the rank and the number of boundary circles. Now, what about so yeah, remarks. These are very important, but out of scope to discuss. Out of scope of this talk to discuss. So, act of sliding handles can be understood in a rigorous algebraic settings as follows. So, the term rank, as many of you might know what a rank is, what rank corresponds to, is that related to a certain vector space. So, it is essentially that's why we use the word rank, because it refers to the rank of a certain vector space that is associated to the surface. Second, handle sliding corresponds to choosing a new basis in that vector space. Okay, so thirdly, the third that the rank of a vector space is independent of a choice of basis. You need not be concerned that the entire classification was based on choosing a collection of substantial arcs. A different, if you had chosen a different choice of different collection of substantial arcs, that would have resulted in the same rank. So that's discussing that vector space is out of scope of this talk, but I just need I just wanted to mention it to all of you. So next, now we talk about closed orientable surfaces. Closed means they don't have a boundary. Okay, so suppose you have a disk. Let's suppose I have a disk, right? I sew another disk. I attach another disk to the boundary of this disk. What surface do I get? Can you write in the chat? What surface do you think we get? Attaching another disk along its boundary to a disk. Sphere. Yes, exactly. A sphere. If we attach two disks, if we glue two disks together along the entire length of the boundary, the result would be a sphere. You can see this simply. We now turn to filling all the boundary circles of a surface with disks. So you have a planar surface, suppose, and so basically, as I had shown earlier, it is essentially a big disk from small holes removed from it. If you start filling the whole surface with disks, that is, you are gluing together along the entire length of the boundary and the inner kind of the inner holes, you will essentially get back the sphere after you have filled all the holes and you have attached a disk to the outer boundary. So note, you can always suppose, how do I explain this? So suppose when I have a surface with holes removed from it, a planar surface, when you are attaching disk to inside circles, the inside boundary components, it will again result in a planar surface, right? So till that point, it is till that point we get a planar surface, but we have an exceptional circle that is the outside boundary. That on attaching disk to it, we get a sphere. So it can no longer be a planar surface. So now what we show is essentially, let me remove the annotations. So the theorem is the result of filling all of the boundary circles of a planar surface with disks is a sphere, as we already saw. The sphere is the only surface such that cutting along any simple closed curve on the surface of the sphere, like on that surface, yields a pair of disks. So you can observe that if you have a sphere and you cut along, let's say, any simple closed curve, you will get a pair of disks. The second statement is a Jordan-Curve theorem for sphere, which can be related to the Jordan-Curve theorem for plane, because a sphere and a plane are very similar. Like, take a whole plane, add a point of infinity, you will get a sphere, right? But a sphere and a plane are very different surfaces. Not very, but are different surfaces. Can you see why? Like, can anyone unmute them and mute themselves and speak? Why a sphere and a plane have to be a different? surface. Anyone? No. Okay. So basically, in a plane, if you let's say take a line in the plane and remove that line, you essentially separate the whole plane. But the same is not possible for. But when you consider a sphere, you need a circle. Let's say you can see why a circle separates a sphere. So you need a circle to separate the sphere. But again, circle and line are different entities because yeah, that's a possible explanation. But separation properties makes it more rigorous. So you need a circle to separate the sphere, whereas a line can separate the plane. And a line and circle are different because removing a point from the line separates it, but removing a point from the circle does not separate it. So you get why sphere and plane are different, but they are very similar in some aspects. Okay, so now we move on. So we define the rank of a close orientable surface to be the rank of the surface that results when a disk is removed from it. So suppose you have a sphere, you remove the disk, or you suppose you have a torus, you remove a disk from it, which essentially gives you the puncture torus, and the rank of that surface you will call the rank of the close orientable surface to be that. So a rank of a torus will be 2. You can see why, right? Because removing a disk from a torus will give us a puncture torus, and the rank of that surface is 2. Okay, so theorem. Two close orientable surfaces are topologically equivalent if and only if they have the same rank. Uh, okay, so this is a very interesting theorem, which let's say which agrees to our intuition our based on the case of orientable surfaces with boundary. So before proving this theorem, there is a more fundamental question to answer. Suppose we are given a close orientable surface. Does the rank of the surface depend on so here's a mistake, I guess. Here's a typo. No, there is no typo, my bad. Does the rank of the surface depend on which disk is removed? Okay, so what do you think the answer is? Does the rank of the surface depend on which disk is removed? No. Yes, the answer is no. It does not depend, and we will prove it. So let's prove it. Suppose we are given a close orientable surface. There are three cases to consider. Let us look at this diagram. So there are three cases to consider. The first is the two disks you remove overlap each other. In that case, just you can always shape the outer disk to the lower disk, right? The second, so essentially the rank will be the same. The second case will be the disks overlap, but are not essentially one is not essentially embedded inside the another. So this is the case two. So when you see this, so this is overlapped. Now what you can do by case one, contract the let's say any of the surfaces. So you have so now you get a surface in which both of these do not overlap at all. No part is common in these both, and we reduce the case two into the case three. So the case three is essentially that you have two disks that do not overlap each other at all. So you can see here you have these two disks that do not overlap at all. So what we can do is we consider a loop. We consider a connecting arc between these two disks, and we take a boundary of this arc combined with let me mark with a different color. So essentially what you do is take a boundary of this arc combined with the disks. So you get a surface. Let's say you'll get this surface which has to be attached. You remove it, you have to attach it back later on. So essentially if any of the if you remove any of the disks here, you will get an annulus, right? Suppose I remove this disk, I'll get an annulus. Suppose I remove this disk, I'll get an annulus. That this surface I removed, right? But annulus are homeomorphic to each other, right? So we can just paste paste an annulus instead of this surface, right? So you will again get the same rank. Is this clear with everyone? If yes, say yes. If not, no, say no. If you need time, say I need time. One or okay, no. Okay, so what you do is essentially, okay, I'll explain once more. So suppose you have this curve. Let's say I have these two discs to be removed. I consider these two discs. We have to show that rank will be the same if any of the two discs are removed. So what I do is essentially I'll connect these discs by, let's say, a connecting arc. This is an arc just connecting these two discs, and I'll remove a neighborhood of this surface that contains the connect. Sorry, oh my bad. Uh, Wait a second. I'll draw it again. Clear my annotations. So suppose you have a surface. You have two discs to be considered. So you want to prove that removing any of the discs will result in the same rank. Now I connect these two discs by, say, a connecting arc. Let's say I connect these by this, and I consider neighborhood of this arc along with the discs. So I remove. So I connect. I consider this surface. I remove it. I remove this surface from the original surface. Now, essentially, from this surface, which is equivalent to a disk with having two disks marked on it. If you remove any single of the disks, suppose you remove this, you get an annulus. That is this one, this surface. Or if you remove the other disks, you get an annulus. And we know annulus are homeomorphic. Any annulus is homeomorphic to any other. So we can essentially paste a annulus inside of any annulus inside of this surface back to the surface, and we get the same rank as before. Is it clear now? We get the same rank in any case, right? So it's clear. One or two more yeses, then I'll continue. Uh, if you have doubt, you yes. Okay. So I'll move on now. I'll continue. Uh, so we proved that removing any disk from the surface will result in the same rank. By the way, what's the time? It's 12:42. We have half an hour left. Okay, cool. We can discuss projective plane later on. Nice. We have enough time. So proof of the classification. Now suppose that two closed surface. Now what you do is basically, okay, let me show. Suppose you have, yeah, suppose you have a surface. Let's say this, and what I will do is basically remove a disk from it. That should give me the rank, right? So now what do I have in my hand is now an orientable surface with one boundary circle and let's say rank n, right? After removing this disk, what I have is basically a surface with one boundary circle and let's say a rank of n. The rank will always be even. If you have observed before, let's say a rank, you need not care about it right now, but if you have observed before, the rank has to be even. Suppose a rank of n or k, one boundary circle and a rank k. By the classification of orientable surfaces with boundary, we prove this is a unique surface. So we can always show the homeomorphism of this type of this surface with disk removed to another surface that is closed with the disk removed. And what we did was what we did was essentially remove a disk. But since disks are homeomorphic to each other, we can paste the disks back, and we would have homeomorphisms between the whole surface. Do you follow? Do you all follow what I said? Yes, yes. Okay, cool. So I'll just read the this proof once again. So to measure the rank, we remove a disk from either and compute the rank of both. So suppose you have given two closed surfaces that have the same rank. We want to see that these are topologically the same. So to measure the rank, what we basically do is remove a disk from either and compute the rank of the bounded surfaces. So the bounded surfaces have the same rank and both have one boundary circle. So the bounded surfaces are topologically the same, which we proved earlier in classifying orientable surfaces with boundary. That is, there is a homeomorphism between the bounded surfaces. Now we want to construct a homeomorphism between the original closed surfaces. The bounded surfaces are contained within the closed surfaces. So there is a map between rather large subsets of the closed surfaces. The correspondence is given everywhere, but on the but except on the small disks that were removed. But since the disks are homeomorphic to each other, so the given homeomorphism can be extended to the entire surface. Therefore, we prove that the two closed surfaces are topologically the same. So I hope it is clear now. If it is not, just unmute yourself and ask your doubt. So I hope it is clear to everyone. So I'll continue. Remarks. Since the rank of surface with one boundary circle is always an even number, to observe this, just note that it for having one boundary circles, it always has to have toroidal holes, right? If it has annular holes, let's say like this, then it can't have let's say one boundary circle. And if suppose you have a surface with boundary circles, then it has to have only toroidal holes, which in that case we saw that the rank will have to be an even number. We define the genus of a close orientable surface to be half of that rank. Now genus is the same we saw earlier, that is the number of holes in the surface. So suppose you have a torus, you remove a disk from it, and you get a surface with, let's say, with one boundary circle which has rank 2. So its hole will be a number of holes, the genus will be this is an alternative definition of genus. uh, Proving that this is the same is not in the scope of this talk, but just to mention it, we this is an alternative definition of genus. You define this rank and take half of that rank, which is an even number, and you get the genus, which is the number of holes. So the genus measures the number of holes in the solid object that is bounded by the surface. So you might wonder if the rank of a closed surface can be defined without cutting a disk from the surface. The answer is yes. So closed surfaces do not have substantial arcs because they have no boundary, but they have instead substantial circles. A substantial circle is essentially a simple closed curve that does not separate. So suppose you have a torus. This is a substantial circle. This does not separate. Spheres do not have a substantial circle because whenever you remove a simple closed curve from it, you will get, say, two disks. But torus and higher genus surfaces do have substantial circles. Now, a very important theorem in topology is a Poincare duality theorem that implies that a substantial circle in a bounded surface will intersect a substantial arc in a point, and that substantial circles can be paired by their intersection. Basically the point is that a substantial circle in a bounded surface will intersect a substantial arc in a point. Now, if you remind when I said that you have to cut the Mobius strip along its length from the middle, and when you cut it, you saw that it does not separate. Does everyone remember that when you cut a Mobius strip from the middle, it does not separate, right? Yes. Okay. So now what we did essentially was basically, now see, Mobius strip has, let's say, one substantial arc, right? Like if you cut perpendicular to the length, then you will separate the surface. Then you will not separate the surface. You will get a long strip of paper. So it has a substantial arc, but we said that it has to have a substantial circle which intersects the substantial arc in a point, right? So the circle you cut it along was that substantial circle. So it should not be a surprise now to you that it does not separate. The Mobius strip does not separate. Uh, so what I said is clear to everyone? Okay, good. So so you should not be surprised when cutting the movie strip from the middle does not separate the surface. Here is a perhaps why will it not separate? Because as I said, okay, movie strip has a Anish, can you switch on your mic? So you see why?
Yes, Lord.
Yeah. So basically, you see it has a substantial arc when you cut perpendicular to its
Yes.
length. Yeah. So by Poincare duality, we know that there is a substantial circle which intersects it in a point. So when you cut it along the center, along the length, that was essentially a substantial circle. That is why it
Oh,
does not
okay.
separate. Yeah. Okay. You get it now? Okay, good.
Yeah.
So yeah, okay. So here is a perhaps most amazing thing of all. Essentially, okay, let's see one more explanation you can give of why, let's say, cutting along the middle does not separate a Mobius strip, but a strip with, let's say, one full twist. Is essentially, so suppose, let's say this was your, you have this twists, whatever number of twists, and this is your paper, right? So let's say I have this left boundary, I have this right boundary, I have this left boundary, I have its right boundary, right? In a normal, suppose in an annulus you don't give it a twist and you just attach it, right? So left maps to left, right maps to right, right? So essentially when you cut along its middle, you will separate the surface. But suppose you give it a odd number of half twists, so your left will be mapped to right and your right will be mapped to the left, right? So essentially you can explain using this why it has to have, with an odd number of half twists, you have to have a surface which has only one boundary. Because suppose you start tracing along this, you follow the left, you will reach the this side. Wait, did I just? Okay, I'll redraw. When you give a half number of odd twists, let me change the color to. This is left, and this is right. This is right. This is right. When you give a half number of odd twists, you essentially glue this to left to right and this left to right. Okay, so when you start tracing along this left, you will reach this left, and from this you will transition into this right, and then you will this reach into this right, and you will get back to the left, right? So you can see why it has to have one boundary component. Is it clear to everyone? While half number of twists will give us one boundary component, but even number of twists will give us two boundary components. Because here left, if you have even number of boundary components, left will be mapped to left, right will be mapped to right. So okay, yeah. So this is so you can explain the cutting along the center, why it is separating, why is it separating the even number of twists when you get the surface with a full twist. When you cut it along its length from the middle, you get two surfaces. You can again reason that by the same logic that left maps to left here and right maps to right in even number of half twists. So a very interesting application of this is, so basically when you cut the Mobius strip from middle, you get a strip with one full twist. If you did what I said, if you cut along its middle, you will get two other same surfaces, two other same annulus with full twists, that are linked together, right? So a twisted annulus is a model of a closed circular DNA. Okay, so if you have seen DNA, it is essentially like this, right? So basically, it has annulus with many number of twists in it, many number of half twists in it. So the twisted annulus is a model, oversimplistic model of closed circular DNA. Inside all your cells, you have a closed circular DNA. the model of, so whenever DNA replication occurs, it cuts along it gets cut along its length from the middle, and it separates into two. So you get two DNA structures which are linked together, right? But there is a problem because the DNA has to become disentangled. So you have those two linked. You have to remove that link between the DNA. So the need for this entanglement caused biologists to discover certain enzymes called topoisomerase. So this topoisomerase basically controls the topology of the DNA, the annulus with many number of twists in it. By regulating the action of topoisomerase in cancer cells, replication can be slowed in of cancer cells. So in this way, topology is used to help cure cancer. Uh, okay, so that's a very fascinating fact to me. So now we move to non-orientable. So that concludes our talk of orientable surfaces. We have almost 15 minutes left, in which we can talk about projective plane in 15 minutes. So in 10 for 10 minutes, and for rest 5 minutes, I will show you fancy pictures. Okay, right? So let's talk about non-orientable surfaces. So let's return to very, 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 very back. So yeah, here's a so a surface, we talked about non-orientable surfaces, that it is not possible to make a consistent choice of surface normal vector at every point in a non-orientable surface. Another A consequence of this is basically left right does not make sense globally in a non-orientable surface. Also, equivalent definition is there exists a continuous path on which one can move and look like its mirror image on returning to the starting point. So some examples we said were projective plane and Klein bottle. One more fun fact I stated was that every non-orientable surface has a Mobius band as a subsurface. Okay, so let me return back to projective plane. Yeah. So a Mobius band has one bound. So observe, a Mobius band has one boundary circle and has rank one. Those two facts characterize the Mobius band among all surfaces, because orientable surfaces with one boundary circle have ranks that are even numbers, as we discussed earlier. So the disk has one boundary circle. Uh, so we have two. Suppose so we have two say surfaces which have one boundary circle, the Mobius band and a disk. What is a natural thing to do? Glue them along their boundary, right? Entirely glue them along their boundary. The result you get is a projective plane. So so a main feature of projective plane is you can't so there have you seen most of you must have seen projective geometry, I guess. So there are various ways to interpret it, projective geometry, projective planes, for example. You can talk about, let's say, the most basic is adding a adding a line at infinity to a plane. The second thing, that's a first interpretation. The second thing is, what you do is take a 3D sphere, and essentially the plane with a point at infinity is same as that of a sphere, as we talked about it earlier. The next point is, it can be realized as a non-orientable surface too, the projective plane. That is what we are going to discuss mainly right now. So we saw that we stated that the Mobius band, when glued to a disk along the entirety of its boundary, we get a projective plane. Okay, so basically, this is a model for projective plane, which can't be represented in a 3D space. You need four dimensions to properly observe projective plane without self intersections. So a Boy's surface is a realization of projective plane in the 3 space. This is a Boy's surface shown below. We can also observe projective plane as a result of quotient topology. I will discuss what is quotient topology now. So okay, let's talk about it. First of all, let's talk about a very interesting uh, observation. So any closed curve separates the plane. I'm not saying simple. Any closed curve also separates the plane. because you can always find a simple closed curve within that closed curve, and that separates the plane, so the closed curve will also separate the plane. So we try to find this analog of the statement in higher dimensions. So a similar statement holds in ordinary three-dimensional space. An embedded closed surface separates three space into two regions. So an embedded surface is one that does not intersect itself in the space. So basically, embedded surfaces, uh, let's say some examples are torus or sphere, right? These are and they separate the three space into two regions, the inside and outside. Embedded surfaces can be thought of as the analogy of simple in the term simple closed curve, but it is not exactly that easy to state. Embedded surfaces are much more complex than simply saying they are analogous to simple and simple closed curve. So, an embedded surface separates space into two pieces. So, suppose you have a simple closed curve that intersects the surface at least once. Then it must intersect the surface an even number of times. Can you see why? So, let's say you start tracing tracing the simple closed curve from one point. So, to return to the point again, because it is closed, you have to intersect an even number of times. Essentially, you have to exit and enter in pairs. Does everyone understand this statement? A simple closed curve intersects the surface at least once, must intersect it in even number of times. Okay, good. Okay, but with projective plane, we can construct a loop in space that only intersects the projective plane once. That would prove that a projective plane has to self intersect. Okay, so let's prove this. You remember the paper diagram you drew of Mobius strip? Yeah, yes, yes. So just what you do is you mark the center of the Mobius strip along its length. Start at one point, start placing a thread and following the boundary. Following the surface. You will essentially get towards the other side of the surface. Other side, now side is in quotes because side is like Mobius strip only has one side, but you get what I'm saying, right? That you will reach the other side of the surface, other side of the paper, because paper has thickness, other side of the paper from where you started. So place a thread along the center of the Mobius strip till you reach the other side of the point you started at. Now the ends of the thread are on either side of the Mobius band, actually either side of the paper, and the thread does not form a closed curve. Now what you do is basically poke a small hole in the paper and let one end of the thread pass through the hole so that the ends of the thread can be tied together. So basically you can imagine what you have, right? Can everyone imagine right now what is being mentioned? Say yes or no. Okay, good. So now you see this thread. Now observe, when we glue a disk to a Mobius band, that results in the projective plane. Now the thread passes once through the surface of the Mobius band, and the Mobius band is contained inside the projective plane. So essentially, if the projective plane were embedded in the space, the loop that intersects the Mobius band once would also intersect the projective plane once, right? No further intersection occurs between the thread and the rest of the projective plane. So and we see that it passes only once. So we have constructed a loop in the space that only intersects the projective plane once. That proves it has to have the projective plane has to have a self intersection when presented in three-dimensional space. Okay, so now let's talk about quotient topology. So quotient topology is basically you have an old space, you glue some points together from the old space to form a new space. You give some equivalence classes of this gluing, and you get a new space by gluing points. For example, let's say you have this R2 or complex, whatever you prefer, and I give the equivalence relation by suppose I give the equivalence relation. Yeah, so my equivalence relation is within a so every point, let's say 0 comma s, that is this point, 0 comma any point, is equivalent to 1 comma s. Suppose I give this equivalence relation 1 comma s, and one more, I have to give 3, and then t comma 0 maps to t comma 1. I'll not write it right now, it's just, so any point this maps to this is equivalent to this point, let's say, goes to this, and vice versa. And every point, let's say, every point inside the square, inside the unit square, is equivalent to itself. So what you get essentially, so when you glue these points, you essentially get the torus, as we have seen earlier. We just have given it a rigorous foundation now. So as we saw earlier, this is just the now the what we say, the torus, right? So we have realized it in a quotient topology sense. So similarly, you can give this quotient topology for, let's say, different types of different types of surfaces, like, let's say, suppose you are working in hyperbolic space. Let's not talk about it, I'll talk about it in my hyperbolic geometry talk on Friday. So this quotient topology is basically giving us a new space by gluing points from the old one. So the space that results is necessarily the continuous image of the old space. Now, in this talk, we have used quotient topology many a times. When we glue disks and surfaces together along their boundaries, or like for example, we glued a disk to a Mobius strip. That's also a quotient topology. So a projective plane is the result of gluing diametrically opposite points on the two sphere together. Two sphere is essentially your normal sphere. If we glue diametrically opposite points on the two sphere, we get the projective plane. This is another interpretation of projective plane in 3D. That is, think of the surface standardly embedded in the space. A diameter of the sphere punctures the sphere into 2 points, right? Glue these 2 points together for every pair of points on the sphere. This quotient map can be thought of in two pieces. So suppose you have this is your sphere. What you do is take out this hemisphere, take out this hemisphere. This is a tropical line, let's say, and you take this tropical line. What you want to say is this point maps to this point maps to this, right? So essentially, what you can do is take this tropical strip. Wait a second. So essentially, what you can do is take this tropical strip, and basically, like, just let me show what I'm trying to say. Take this strip, and just uh, how do I say this? Basically, wait a second. Let me see how I wrote it earlier. Yeah, so basically, flip it upside down, right? Give it a upside down flip. So now what we will get is this tropical strip will be equal to, let's say, uh, this is a bad diagram, whatever. Okay, so when you give this a when you flip it upside down, you will essentially, you have this point will come here, right? And so basically these both will be just opposite to each other. Now, can everyone see why when I give it a when I turn it upside down and give it a flip, why? Yes, no? Just say yes or no. One or two more yeses, then, or I'll explain again. If anyone wants me to explain again, just write it in the chat. There's no way of there's no point of being shy. Okay, if no one has a doubt, then I'll continue. So when you give it an upside down flip, and you map, so basically what essentially you're doing now, when you so suppose you have this strip of paper, and so when you give it an upside down flip, and you glue the surfaces back together. What you get is a Mobius strip. Just try it out with the paper. Just take two halves of the paper, give it one upside down and flip and attach. You'll realize you get a Mobius strip. So essentially, after rotating this hemisphere 2, we are again doing the same thing. You take a movie strip and attaching a disc to it, essentially. Okay, so let me, yeah. So the total space that results is a projective plane, which is a movie strip attached with the plane. Sorry, attached with the disc. Now, when you attach the movie strip with the disc, you get this surface. If you allow self intersections to be possible. Now I'll show you the surface in a moment. So the slides have ended. So that's it for the talk right now. Though there is a part where most of you must be interested. Is we'll see the boy surface right now. Okay, so I'll start sharing another screen. Just wait a minute. I'll start sharing another screen. Just wait a minute. Okay, so let me share another screen. Just wait a minute. Okay, so I'll start sharing the screen now. Share content, optimize for motion and video, and share. Okay, so this is, let's see a boy surface in it. No, this is a cross cap. We didn't get time to discuss about it. Okay, one thing. Can everyone see the? Can everyone see this screen with something drawn on it? If just say yes or no. Yes. Okay. Good. So this is essentially a boy surface. This is how it's built. Let me. So yeah. So basically, you have this curls that you can see are basically Mobius strip, and this hemisphere is a part of the disc you are connecting to the Mobius strip. Can does every okay, wait, let me try this with you. So does everyone know uh, how to see in 3D with naked eyes? Just okay, so you have to converge these two images with your eyes. Just focus behind the screen, and you will converge these two images into one, and you can see 3D part of it. Can everyone do that, or can most of you do that? For those who can do right now, I'll start moving this, and you will observe the same shape in 3D. uh, this is the same that the other Anish sent, right? You remember that, right, Anish? Okay, so basically what you do is focus behind the screen using your eyes. Not squint it a little, just focus behind the screen and converge these two images into one using your eyes. Can you do that a little? If not, that's not a problem. I'll share with you after. Like I'll share a video with you that how to do it, and then you can do it. Then you can do the same later. I'll share the software with you. Okay, share the software with everyone. Okay, so for those who can see, convert the images and observe in 3D, I am moving it right now. If you can see, if you're able to observe right now, this surface must be in 3D right now. Okay, I'll share now. I'll show another surface. Let's say this is a movie strip. Oh, by the way, someone asked me what is a Klein bottle yesterday. I forgot to tell you. A Klein bottle is essentially the same as gluing a Mobius strip with a Mobius strip along its boundary. If you do that, you'll get a Klein bottle. Okay, so this is a Mobius strip, as you can see. You must have observed in your while you made it. Let me show you a Klein bottle. So this is a Klein bottle. Again, the curves, basically these curves essentially refer to the Mobius strip's half widths. You are basically pasting a Mobius strip with a Mobius strip along its boundary. So this is a Klein bottle. These are non-orientable surfaces, as most non-orientable surfaces cannot be realized into a plane. And let me show you another. Uh, let's say we talk about parametric surfaces. Let's talk about let's see, a torus would be good. Okay, so this is the general torus if you want to see. So basically this I'll share the link of the software with you and you can observe all kind of surfaces as you like. So okay, so I'll stop sharing now. And that's it for the talk. Thank you everyone. You were a great audience. So if you have any doubts, any feedback, just unmute yourself and say. If no doubts or any feedback, I'll end in 2 minutes. I'll stop. I'll end the meeting in 2 minutes. Till then, anyone who wants to leave can leave. Anyone who wants to ask a doubt or give a feedback can do so. We'll meet at 2:30. By the way, 2:30 during the question answer time. We will discuss two things. One is let's say let's say the assignment first, and then first we will discuss doubts, then the assignment, then we will prove the Jordan curve theorem for piecewise smooth curves using the assignment. Okay. So seems like no one has a doubt or anything. Let's end the meeting. Bye everyone. Meet you at 2:30. If the time is 2:30, I'll have to confirm the time, but I think it is at 2:30. Let me end the meeting now.